Welcome to this deep dive. Picture a thriving, cosmopolitan capital in the early 1950s, actively debating secular democratic reforms. Now, fast forward to today's heavily militarized theocracy in Iran, the transformation over the last century is just dizzying. And just a quick mandatory disclaimer for you listening, we're approaching this completely impartially today. So no political sides, we're just unpacking the provided historical and political sources to discover how that massive shift actually happened.
Right, exactly. And to really understand the mechanics of that shift, you have to look at a brief window between 1941 and 1953, because during this period, Iran actually had a functioning secular democracy under Prime Minister Mossadegh.
And Mossadegh made a move that kind of changed everything, right? I mean, he nationalized Iran's oil, basically taking it out of the hands of a British monopoly.
Yeah, which caused Britain to absolutely panic. They imposed an embargo and eventually, brought the U.S. into it.
Which culminates in 1953. That's when the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated Operation Ajax, a coup that ousted Mossadegh and reinstated the monarch, the Shah.
Exactly. And that coup fundamentally altered the country's DNA. I mean, by artificially decapitating a democratic government, they removed the moderate center of Iranian politics.
So it's like pulling the foundational Jenga block. Or think of a political system like a pressure cooker. Mossadegh's secular democracy was the pressure valve.
That is a great analogy. Yeah.
Right, so if you weld that valve shut with a coup, the internal pressure doesn't just disappear. Did that essentially force all future opposition to hide in the only safe place left, which was the mosques?
Yes, absolutely. The mosques were basically the only community centers largely immune to the Shah's secret police, the Savak. And the Shah was able to rule with absolute terrifying control because he built what economists call a rentier state.
Meaning he funded his government by renting out resources like oil rather than collecting taxes from the people.
Right. And the mechanism there is crucial. I mean, if a ruler doesn't need your tax money, he doesn't need your consent. He had infinite oil revenue.
Which he used to fund his white revolution, right?
Exactly, forcing rapid modernization from the top down, but bypassing political reform entirely.
But those top-down reforms broke the rural economy. Small farmers couldn't afford to sustain the newly divided plots of land. Millions went bankrupt and flooded into urban slums.
Right, so to a Western observer, Tehran looked booming and modern, but underneath you had staggering inequality and poverty, which really primed the pump for the 1979 revolution.
And this is where the timeline gets really fascinating, because the 1979 revolution wasn't just this monolithic Islamic movement initially. It was a really fragile, chaotic coalition of Marxists, Bazaari merchants, and secularists.
Yeah, it was a massive mix of people.
So wait, if there were so many secularists and Marxists, how did they end up letting a strict theocracy take over under Ayatollah Khomeini?
Through masterful political deception. While he was exiled in France, Khomeini portrayed himself as this populist figurehead. He hid his extreme theocratic mandate, which is known as Vilayat-e-Faqih.
Meaning the guardianship of the Islamic jurist?
Exactly. The doctrine argues that a cleric should hold ultimate political veto power, but he sold it to the secularists as mere spiritual guidance.
So they thought they could use him to mobilize the religious masses, and then he would just...
quietly step aside.
Right. But the moment the Shah fell, Khomeini dropped the facade.
Yeah.
Once in power, he capitalized on the 1979 U.S. Embassy hostage crisis.
Oh, to whip the country into a frenzy.
Exactly. It was the perfect smokescreen to label liberals and secularists as foreign sympathizers. He purged them from the government and violently reversed rights. I mean, the legal marriage age for girls was drastically dropped from 18 to 9, and the hijab was mandated.
Fast forward to today, and that totalitarian control has evolved. The IRGC went from a militia to a massive economic empire. But there's a glaring disconnect here. If 98% of the youth are literate and globally connected, why can't they break free today?
Well, because the state has entirely abandoned social legitimacy. When a regime stops trying to win over the public, its only remaining tool is extreme violence.
Which is horrifying. It is. We saw the blueprint for this in 1988. With Khomeini's death commission's prison massacres, they systematically executed tens of thousands of political prisoners.
Just to ensure zero alternative leadership remained alive. And that brutal mechanism was applied directly to the streets during the massive economic uprisings of 2025 and 2026.
Yeah, IRGC troops shot unarmed civilians, killing up to 30,000 people.
It's a tragic stalemate. You have a highly educated, forward-looking public trapped, This matters to you listening because it's the ultimate case study in what happens when a state loses all social legitimacy and relies purely on terror.
Exactly. Whenever the gap between the citizens' modern aspirations and the regime's archaic rules sparks a protest, the state defaults to slaughter.
Which leaves you with one major unresolved variable to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. What happens to the theocracy the day the military finally refuses to pull the trigger?